Hello all, Jules here for WhatCulture.com, and I want to talk to you today about the trials and tribulations of being a DC fan. Now, I love the often gritty and mental tales that DC tells, and Batman Dark Knight's Metal might have been one of my favourite series in a long old while. However, it's not been an easy ride for DC fans, and that's because while Marvel and Fox have enjoyed successes with their movies, the DCEU has struggled to make the same type of impact in the box office. Now, don't get me wrong, their films have turned in more green than when Hal Jordan's ring leaks in the wash, but critically, they've always been a bit flagging. Here's hoping for a brighter future for DC. However, there's a few issues that fans still seem to be ignoring. So let's detail some of these together today in the hopes of providing a better quality of connected universe going forward. I'm Jules for WhatCulture.com, and this is 10 problems nobody wants to admit about the DCEU. Number 10. Rebooting Suicide Squad is a bit silly. While the addition of James Gunn to the DCEU with the Suicide Squad is a great move, the confirmation that he's overseeing a reboot rather than a sequel is surely a mistake, right? I mean, sure, there will be a lot of fans out there who are enthusiastic about the project, or that the original movie will be wiped out of existence, but it ruins Warner Brothers' narrative and also makes it seem very clear that they considered it a failure. Which then makes it even more confusing when you learn that the company is also releasing a spin-off to the original movie, meaning that we have a weird situation in which the main film is now written out of existence, but the offshoot remains. Plus, a lot of people are arguing the reboot is coming too soon. We barely let the dust settle and now we're off on another round. It's a strange move that doesn't reward the loyal fan base. And trust me, there are a lot of people who did like Suicide Squad. A lot of people. So it's just another middle finger to them as well. Number 9. It doesn't know what it wants to be. It's no secret that the DCEU has had a tonal problem. Man of Steel was criticised for being an overly gloomy reinterpretation of Superman, while Batman vs Superman took things even darker and more miserable rather than address these complaints. Then Wonder Woman came along and opted for a far lighter tone, more in line with what audiences typically expect from the likes of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It also ended up being the DCEU's only critically lauded film to date, sending Warner Brothers into something of a tailspin as they began to wonder quite what tone these movies should actually strike. Justice League's issues were largely down to an attempt to, air quotes, fix Zack Snyder's tone, and even Aquaman has several different personalities. News that there's going to be a horror-esque spin-off focused on The Trench does nothing to allay fears that there's still an identity crisis going on, particularly when Shazam's lighter tone is now getting such wide praise and acclaim. I get it that each superhero movie carries with it a different mood, but when you look at how much the Marvel films are leaning into the light-hearted while still managing to hit the emotional high points, it's just clear that DC have to do better in the future. Number 8. Superman's death happened way too soon. Superman's death in Batman vs Superman should have been jaw-dropping, an absolutely devastating moment, but it actually fell pretty flat for several reasons. Firstly, audiences weren't yet comfortably acquainted with the Henry Cavill Superman after meeting him in Man of Steel, and in Batman vs Superman, its character development was pretty much nil. Then there's the fact that he spends most of BVS being a dour sourpuss, which didn't exactly endear him to fans, not to mention that about 10 minutes after he died, his resurrection had already started. Superman's death should have been saved until his third or fourth movie to really capitalise on the emotion and magnitude of it. But instead, like so many things in the DCEU, it was rushed through and felt rather neutered as a result. Number 7. Many announced movies will never get made. Warner Brothers has announced, formally or informally, a huge number of planned DCEU movies, though it's sad to say that a large number of them will probably never get made. Where to begin? I mean, Nightwing talk has gone quiet pretty recently, Justice League Dark has been in the works for years, but it just seems like more trouble than it's worth. Solo movies revolving around Black Adam, Deadshot and Deathstroke sound like pipe dreams, and with this much rejection it's hard to be optimistic, right? I mean, the Marvel roadmap is clear, and it's been bolstered by strong crossover events, meaning that even risky characters are destined to get their outings in some form unless something terrible happens. However, with DC, it sucks that you can't truly get hyped about future movies with the same certainty as the Marvel ones because you're not actually sure deep down if they're going to make the cut. Number 6. The lack of a clear franchise godfather. One of the major things attributed to the MCU's huge success is the fact that the mega producer known as Big Kev has served as its godfather ever since the beginning, overseeing each individual film and ensuring a consistent-ish level of quality across almost 20 blockbuster movies. The DCEU sadly seems to lack such a stalwart figure, what with Zack Snyder being neither acclaimed in his overseer role nor currently capable of giving it the attention it needs with his unfortunate family issues. The DCEU initially seemed more interested in creating a brain trust style thing, overseen by Jeff Jones, but now he's gone too and the franchise is seriously lacking a figurehead. Having Joss coming in to help with Suicide Squad is a start, but it's a short gap solution that doesn't actually address the issue. Number 5. CGI overkill will always be a problem. One issue that's been consistent across the DCEU so far is the overabundance of garish visual effects. And I'm not having a pop at all of the films, but there have been more than a fair few instances of visuals that just look, well, for lack of better terms, wonky. Man of Steel's final battle featured a ton of blurry fighting. Batman vs Superman's Doomsday looked insanely generic, and Suicide Squad's Enchantress finale was just like watching a puddle of plastic smash against each other. Then you had the Justice League that had a ton of visual inconsistencies. Even Wonder Woman's final battle looked iffy in places. Now, across the whole field, some of its visuals look amazing, like Aquaman stuff, but others, well, looks like it's coming from an early 90s film. Bizarrely, the MCU has managed to kind of perfect how they make their films look, being rooted in reality despite being over-the-top sci-fi MacGuffin in so many other places. This is down to exceptional CGI work and teams that have a clear visual direction, again linking us back to the issues we just talked about with direction. Number 4. No one really cares about CYBORG. Of the Justice League's lineup, there's one hero that sticks out like a sore thumb, and that's CYBORG. Even after a lengthy reshoot process for the film, which was meant to make him into a lighter character, a lot of people complained that he just was a cyber sourpuss with a storyline that not many people cared about at all. Sure, he's got his fans, but because of the limited screen time, the rushed origin story he got, and his often restrained delivery, he's hardly the standout member of his cast. The cyborg that was in Teen Titans, that's what we wanted. But here, well, it was a bit more number crunching. Therefore, as strange as it sounds, doing a solo movie for CYBORG, which is speculated to come out in 2020, might actually be a bad move. His origin was already hurried through, and it's not clear if he has the pull to be the star of his own movie. However, we will live in hope that A, this can be achieved, and B, that Warner Bros. Doesn't cut his story. Number 3. There are too many different continuities. Marvel Studios was smart to ensure that there was minimal overlap with their separate TV and movie properties. For the most part, the MCU TV shows don't create conflict with the continuity of the movies and vice versa. DC, meanwhile, has opted to take, well, the opposite approach, setting TV and film in two separate universes. The movies are, of course, the DCEU, while the likes of Arrow, The Flash, and Legends of Tomorrow exist within the Arrowverse, which has occasionally intersected with yet another separate universe containing Supergirl. Now, I get it, creating a consistent continuity out of such a complex tapestry isn't easy, but DC hasn't really even tried. It's just not very rewarding to an audience to have these potentially complementary areas of DC lore kept so far apart. And then there's the fact that the Matt Reeves The Batman will be in another timeline, and that the Joker origin movie will be too. And then there's the Suicide Squad and Birds of Prey, which will presumably have their own separate ones now with the reboot. I mean, talk about a crisis on infinite Earths. Number 2, their endgame failure. For a while, it looked like it was going to be Justice League or bust for the DCEU, and it's true that that film's comparative failure sent shockwaves through the franchise. And I don't mean failure in the sense that it was a god-awful film, as there were moments of it which showed what DC could do when it was running on full steam. It was just hampered by trying to squeeze so much into one film. Sadly, the Justice League is now dead. Ben Affleck is gone, Henry Cavill was linked with an exit, and the prospect of a Justice League movie without Batman and Superman is pretty ludicrous. What's even more ludicrous is that some fans are even entertaining the idea that there will be another one because of the comparative successes of Aquaman and Wonder Woman. Warner Bros. Now face the issue of having Wonder Woman and Aquaman as strong properties that arguably now can't meet up again without the question of absence shouting a little too loudly, because people are just going to be going, right, well, it's good to see these two. Where's Batman? Where's Superman? The big boys. And unfortunately, the studio's been robbed of what should have been their most lucrative DCEU brand. And number 1, it will always lag behind Marvel. This is the toughest fact for DC fans to come to terms with, and it's the fact that the DCEU is always going to be lagging behind the MCU. Yes, I understand that Marvel Studios had a considerable head start on Warner Brothers and effectively built the blueprint for superhero movie universes, but the DCEU's attempts to play catch-up have been pretty dubious so far. The Justice League was a rushed response to get DC back on the map, and while the film didn't do too well with the critics, it at least got them to level peggings. However, and this is a big one, Warner Brothers executives and the fans need to take a step back, take a breath, and make peace with the fact that they're never going to be Marvel. And you know what? Much like when your mum noshes me off in exchange for the loose chips that are left in my takeaway bag, that's just fine. Also, it's my one per list. Marvel took their time building up their characters in solo movies before bringing them together, but the DCEU has tried to skip some basic steps and rush to the main course. That's not how it should work, and if Warner Brothers can't be comfortable working at their own pace, they risk derailing the entire franchise in the long run. So here's hoping they take some notes. And there we go, those were 10 problems that no one wants to admit about the DCEU. And I know that you might be thinking, oh, that's such a negative list. It's not really. I'm saying this from a place of love. I want them to succeed. The only way that you get better products and better things out of life is when you have companies in competition with each other. But still, I hope that films like Shazam prove to people that there is some lightheartedness within the DCEU, and I hope that together we can get the most out of these films. Anyway, if you want to go chat to me more about films and gaming and wrestling and anything else in general, then you can do so at RetroJ over on Twitter. I hope that you are treating yourself well and as fair as you possibly can. Remember, you have been awesome. Never forget that, and I will speak to you soon. Bye!